She swept the corners of the house as if she were sweeping away her own secrets. He walked in silence, without anyone truly hearing him. A silent exchange of glances changed everything, and what was born between them made the impossible happen. Before you dive into this touching story, subscribe to the channel for more tales that show affection can cross any barrier. The woman who once swept the floors and now occupied a place of respect in the grand house, Sarah, felt the weight of gazes upon her. They were no longer looks of indifference, but of scrutiny. Michael's speech on stage had touched many, unexpectedly, validating her presence, but it had also ignited the flames of envy and distrust in some dark corners of the property. Mrs. Patterson, the longtime housekeeper, with her grey hair impeccably pulled back in a tight bun, and a gaze that seemed to have witnessed all the family's secrets for decades, was the embodiment of this resistance. She didn't speak openly against Sarah, not aloud where Dr. Richard might hear, but her insinuations were poisonous, whispered in the corridors to other staff members, creating a climate of apprehension. This woman came from nowhere. Mrs. Patterson commented to Nancy, the cook, while chopping vegetables with unnecessary fury. One day she's a cleaner, the next she's the boys' teacher. Who guarantees she doesn't have ulterior motives? What kind of person hides their past like that? Nancy, a simple woman with a good heart, defended Sarah. But Mrs. Patterson, see how different Michael is. He speaks, he laughs, that's her doing. Whose doing, Nancy? A stranger's. Dr. Richard is a good man, but naive. He believes any sad story, and this so-called report, it didn't appear out of nowhere. Someone knows something she doesn't want us to discover. Mrs. Patterson's words echoed through the rooms, reaching Sarah's ears like a constant buzz. She felt the hostility in the air, but refused to react. Her focus was Michael. The boy, now free from the silence that had imprisoned him, was an explosion of curiosity and energy. He followed her throughout the house, asking questions in different languages, showing her drawings, sharing his thoughts. The connection between them was undeniable, a web of trust and affection that seemed immune to external malice. Dr. Richard, meanwhile, tried to balance his gratitude for Michael's change with the concern generated by the anonymous report. He had confronted Sarah about it, but her response, "I survived and it cost me my name," though laden with deep sadness, hadn't eliminated all doubts. He knew she was hiding something big, but the transformation of his son was such powerful proof of her kindness and competence that he decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. For now. One afternoon, while Sarah and Michael were in the library, immersed in a book of French fables, Dr. Richard entered. He observed the scene for a moment, the boy with eyes shining while Sarah read with a gentle intonation. "Sarah," he called, his voice a little tense, "we need to talk alone." Michael noticed the change in tone and looked from one to the other, the joy diminishing in his face. "Go play in the garden, dear," Sarah said with a slight reassuring smile. "I'll join you soon." Michael hesitated but obeyed. As soon as he left, Sarah's smile disappeared. She closed the book and turned to Dr. Richard, her posture calm but her eyes alert. "I received more information," he began, sitting in the armchair across from her. "The anonymous report mentioned a specific location, an institution. I did some discreet investigations." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "There seems to have been an incident there years ago, something that involved loss, and that your name, the name you used at the time, is linked to it." Sarah listened in silence, her face impassive. The mention of the location and the incident brought a shadow to her eyes, an old pain she tried to keep buried. "I told you," she replied, her voice low. "My past is complicated, painful, but it has nothing to do with Michael or with you." "I want to believe you, Sarah," Dr. Richard insisted, "but the information, it suggests that you might have been responsible, or at least involved in a negative way." "Involved, yes," she admitted, her voice taking on a slight roughness. "Responsible, not in the way they want to make it seem." She stood up and went to the window, looking out at the garden where Michael was running. "I lost everything in that place. everything I loved, everything I was. Surviving meant leaving behind not just my name, but the person I used to be, building a new life from scratch, without traces, because traces would lead back to the pain. And to danger. Danger? Dr. Richard frowned. What danger? Sarah turned, her gaze fixed on him. Not everything that happened was an accident, Dr. Richard. There were interests. People who didn't want certain truths to come to light. People who made sure I couldn't speak. The revelation, though vague, was shocking. Dr. Richard hadn't expected to hear about danger or conspiracy. He thought Sarah's secret was perhaps a past mistake, a debt, something personal. But the mention of interests and people who wanted her, silenced, painted a much darker picture. You're saying that someone tried to harm you? He asked, his voice hesitant. They didn't try, Sarah corrected, her voice cold. They succeeded. For a time. They thought they had destroyed me, that I would never rise again, that I would be just a shadow wandering aimlessly, and for years that's exactly what I was. She paused, the contained emotion overflowing in a sigh. Until I found Michael, and he showed me there was still light. That my voice, even if whispered, could still reach someone, that I could still teach, that I could still to be. Dr. Richard felt a shiver. Sarah's story was deeper and more dangerous than he had imagined. He looked at her, seeing not just the woman who cared for his son, but someone who had faced a terrible storm and emerged marked but not broken. Why didn't you tell me this before? He asked. Fear, she answered simply. Fear that you wouldn't believe me. Fear that the danger would follow me here. Fear of losing the only good thing I found in years, the chance to help your son, and the chance to find myself again. He stood and walked over to her. Sarah, I don't know what to say. This changes things. Does it? She questioned, a flash of apprehension in her eyes. Are you going to ask me to leave? He hesitated. Logic dictated caution. The safety of his home, of his son, was paramount. But what he felt for this woman, his admiration for her strength, his gratitude for Michael's change, was stronger than cold logic. No, he said, making a decision. I won't ask you to leave, but I need to understand better. Who are these people? What did they want? What happened in that place? Sarah looked away, an expression of conflict on her face. It seemed that telling the story was as painful as living it. It's a long story, Dr. Richard, she said, her voice almost inaudible. Her story full of shadows. I have time, he replied, determined, and you deserve to be heard. You deserve for the truth to be known. Meanwhile, outside the library, Mrs. Patterson was passing through the corridor, pretending to be busy with a feather duster. She stopped near the door, ears attentive, trying to catch fragments of the conversation. She heard the mention of the report, of danger, of people who didn't want certain truths to come to light. A cruel smile formed on her lips. She knew that woman was hiding something, and she was getting closer to discovering what. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house grew even more tense. Dr. Richard tried to extract more information from Sarah, who was reluctant to completely open the wounds of the past. She spoke in metaphors, in allusions, as if she were protecting herself and him from something still latent. It was a place of knowledge, she explained one night, as they dined. Michael was already asleep. Where ideas flourished, where the pursuit of truth was the main goal. Sounds like a good place, Dr. Richard commented. It was, she sighed, until knowledge became a threat, until truth became inconvenient for some. And what happened? He gently pressed. A fire, she said. Her voice choked. Officially an accident, but I always knew it wasn't. There were things being discovered, things that could shake power structures, and someone decided it was better to burn it all. Dr. Richard was shocked. A fire. This was much more serious than he had imagined, and Sarah was there. She survived. The people? He asked, fearing the answer. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, a solitary tear rolling down her cheek. Not everyone survived, Dr. Richard. Not everyone. She didn't give more details that night. The pain in her eyes was palpable. Dr. Richard realized he was asking her to relive a deep trauma. He decided not to press further for now, but curiosity and concern consumed him. Who were these people who wanted to silence her? What did she know? And most importantly, did this danger still exist? Meanwhile, Mrs. Patterson continued her own silent investigation. She rummaged through Sarah's trash, looked for any clues in her belongings, listened to phone conversations, when Sarah rarely used the phone. She found a small notebook, worn and without a cover, hidden at the bottom of a drawer. It was full of notes in different languages, strange diagrams and what appeared to be codes. Mrs. Patterson didn't understand any of it, but she felt she had found something significant, something that would prove Sarah wasn't who she claimed to be. She decided to take the notebook to someone who could decipher it, someone outside the house, someone she knew, who had contacts and who wouldn't ask questions. Someone who, perhaps, had their own reasons for wanting to expose Sarah. The next morning, under the pretext of going to the market, Mrs. Patterson left the property with the notebook hidden in her purse. She was about to take a step that would change the game, unaware of the scale of the forces she was about to awaken. The apparent tranquility of the house was about to be shattered by buried secrets and the relentless pursuit of truth, or its concealment. Sarah's life, which she had rebuilt with such care, was again under threat, and this time the danger came not just from the past but from within the very walls she called home. The web of mystery and drama was only beginning to form, and the fate of Michael, Sarah and Dr. Richard himself hung by a thin thread. What would Mrs. Patterson discover? Who was the person she would meet? And how would this affect the fragile peace that Sarah had found? The answers were hidden in the pages of that worn notebook, waiting to be revealed and cast a new shadow over everyone. Mrs. Patterson walked hurriedly through the quiet streets of the neighborhood, Sarah's notebook weighing in her purse like a dark secret. She didn't go to the market. Instead, she headed to a discreet cafe away from the center, where a figure shrouded in mystery awaited her. Sitting at a corner table, with an open newspaper covering part of his face, was a middle-aged man with penetrating eyes and an expression that revealed no emotion. His name was Marcus. He wasn't a friend nor a casual acquaintance. He was someone with whom Mrs. Patterson had a tacit agreement, based on favors and information exchanged over the years. Marcus had connections, knew how to get what he wanted, and most importantly for Mrs. Patterson at that moment, knew how to uncover secrets. Mrs. Patterson sat at the table, discreetly pushing the notebook to him under the table. "This is it," she whispered, looking around to ensure no one was watching them. "It belongs to that woman, Sarah, the one Dr. Richard put in charge of Michael." Marcus took the notebook, feeling the worn texture of the non-existent cover. He opened it casually, flipping through the pages quickly, his eyes scanning the notes. In different languages, the diagrams and the symbols that Mrs. Patterson didn't understand. A slight frown appeared on his face, the first indication that this wasn't as simple as he had expected. "Interesting," he murmured, without lifting his eyes from the notebook. "Not an ordinary diary. Looks like study notes or research." "Research? On what?" Mrs. Patterson questioned, impatient. "Looks like crazy stuff to me, codes, strange drawings." Marcus closed the notebook and tucked it into the folder he was carrying. "I need time to analyze this. It's not something you decipher in 5 minutes, especially with all these mixed languages." He looked at Mrs. Patterson, his expression neutral again. "Why are you so interested in this woman, Mrs. Patterson? Isn't she just the new governess?" "She isn't just anything," Mrs. Patterson retorted, her voice low and intense. "She appeared out of nowhere without a past, and in a few weeks she became the lady of the house. Dr. Richard is bewitched by her, and the boy who never spoke, now won't stop chattering, all because of her. There's something wrong with that, Marcus. Something that doesn't fit." "And you think this notebook contains the answer?" he asked, tapping lightly on the folder. "I'm sure of it," Mrs. Patterson affirmed, convinced. "She's hiding something big, something that made her change her name, her life. Dr. Richard received an anonymous report about her, saying her identity was false. She admitted she used another name, and she talked about an incident, a fire, people who didn't want certain truths to come to light. Marcus was silent for a moment, processing the information. A fire, inconvenient truths, a false identity. This sounded like something that could be much more interesting than just a domestic dispute. "Very well, Mrs. Patterson," he finally said. "I'll investigate this, but it will cost, and I don't guarantee I'll find what you want. Well-kept secrets are hard to unearth." "I know," Mrs. Patterson agreed, "but I need to know, for the safety of Dr. Richard and the boy, and for my own peace of mind." They discussed the terms of the agreement in low voices, away from curious ears. Mrs. Patterson gave Marcus a sum of money, a part of the advanced payment. He promised to contact her as soon as he had something. Mrs. Patterson left the cafe with a mixed feeling of relief and apprehension. She had set the ball rolling, but she didn't know where it would go. Back at the house, tension hung in the air. Dr. Richard tried to act normally, but the conversation with Sarah about the fire and the people who wanted to silence her had deeply disturbed him. He watched her, trying to reconcile the image of the gentle and patient woman who taught his son with the possibility of a dark and dangerous past. Sarah, in turn, felt Dr. Richard's gaze upon her. She understood his apprehension. It was difficult for her to revisit those events. Each memory was like a stab, but she knew that for there to be real trust she needed to tell, more not just to him but to herself. It was time to face the ghosts of the past. One night, after Michael fell asleep, Sarah found Dr. Richard on the porch, looking at the starry sky. She approached and sat beside him. "Dr. Richard," she began, her voice soft. "I know what I said left you worried, and I understand. It's hard to believe something so unlikely." "It's not that it's unlikely, Sarah," he replied, turning to face her. "It's that it's dangerous. You talked about people who wanted to silence you. Are those people still a threat?" Sarah hesitated. "I don't know. After the incident, I hid, changed everything, cut all ties. I hoped that by disappearing I would become irrelevant to them." "And what was so important that they wanted to hide?" he asked, curiosity overcoming fear. Sarah looked at the night sky as if she could find the answers in the stars. "It was about discoveries. Advances in a specific area of knowledge, discoveries that could have a huge impact on the world, but that could also harm powerful interests linked to industries, technologies, things that were worth a lot of money." She explained that the place where she worked wasn't just an educational institution, but also a cutting-edge research center. She was part of a team working on something revolutionary, something that, if disclosed, would change the way certain things were done, making existing technologies obsolete and harming those who had invested in them. "We were young, idealistic," she continued, her voice tinged with nostalgia and sadness. "We believed that knowledge should be shared for the good of all. We didn't realize that not everyone thought that way, that there were those who saw our work as a direct threat to their power and wealth." "So the fire was a way to destroy the research?" Dr. Richard asked, the penny dropping. "And to silence those who knew the truth about it," Sarah added, her voice choked. "They wanted everything to look like an accident, for the research to be lost forever, and for no one to be able to tell what really happened. And you survived," he said, looking at her with admiration and horror. "By a miracle," she whispered. "I was seriously injured, and I lost people dear to me, people who were like family to me." She paused, the painful memories flooding her. "When I recovered, I realized I couldn't go back, that my life as I knew it was over, that I needed to disappear to survive, and to perhaps, one day, honor the memory of those who didn't make it." Dr. Richard listened in silence, the magnitude of Sarah's story leaving him speechless. She wasn't just a woman with a mysterious past. She was a survivor of something that bordered on industrial and scientific conspiracy. The weight of what she carried was immense. "Sarah," he said, extending his hand and gently touching hers. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. No one should have to live through that." She looked at him, a slight sad smile on her lips. "But I did live, and it shaped me. It taught me that the world can be cruel, but it also showed me the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of finding light even in darkness. "And Michael is that light for you?" he asked. "He's more than that," she replied, her eyes shining with affection when speaking of the boy. "Hai gave me a purpose when I had none. He reminded me that communication isn't just about words, but about connection, about being seen and heard, something I thought I had lost forever." The conversation deepened, Sarah revealing more details about the environment of the institution, the passion for research, the camaraderie among team members, and the growing tension they felt as their discoveries approached a critical point. She spoke of veiled warnings, of strange people lurking around the campus in the days leading up to the fire. Everything indicated it hadn't been a fatality, but a deliberate act. While Sarah shared her painful past, Marcus was in his office, immersed in the notebook. He used translation software, dictionaries of rare languages, and even consulted experts in linguistics and cryptography. The notebook was a complex puzzle. The notes didn't follow an apparent logical order, mixed different subjects, and seemed to have layers of meaning. He managed to identify most of the languages: ancient Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, as well as modern languages like Russian and Mandarin. But the difficulty wasn't just in the literal translation, but in the interpretation of technical terms and diagrams. They seemed to be related to physics, chemistry, and something he couldn't completely identify, perhaps biology or engineering. One of the experts he consulted recognized some of the diagrams as being from a very specific and highly confidential research area. "This is cutting-edge material, Marcus," the expert said over the phone. "The kind of thing very few people in the world would have access to, and even fewer would fully understand. Where did you get this?" Marcus evaded the question, but the information confirmed his suspicions. Sarah's notebook wasn't just personal notes. It was a record of valuable knowledge, perhaps, the very research she mentioned to Dr. Richard. And if this knowledge was so dangerous as to lead to fire and persecution, then whoever was behind it might still be interested in recovering it, or in silencing for good whoever possessed it. Marcus continued working, the hours passing without him noticing. He was beginning to piece things together, to see patterns in the codes and notes. There were references to clean energy, to molecular structures, and to something called Project Phoenix. The name caught his attention. Phoenix, the mythical bird that is reborn from ashes. Was it a reference to the fire? He managed to decipher a sequence of numbers and letters that seemed to be a geographical coordinate, but not of a known location. It seemed to be an isolated point, perhaps a secret laboratory or a storage location. With each new discovery, the importance of the notebook became clearer. Sarah wasn't just a survivor, she was the guardian of knowledge that someone was willing to do anything to control. And now, by bringing this notebook to Marcus, Mrs. Patterson had inadvertently placed not just Sarah, but herself, Dr. Richard, and Michael in potential danger. Marcus knew this information was worth a lot, not just to Mrs. Patterson, but to the right people. He had a decision to make: deliver what he discovered to Mrs. Patterson, who would probably use it against Sarah in the dispute for the house, or seek out those truly interested in this knowledge. The second option seemed much more lucrative. Meanwhile, at the house, Sarah felt a growing restlessness, a feeling of being watched. She attributed this to her own trauma, to the paranoia that had accompanied her since the incident. But the truth was that Mrs. Patterson's eyes were always upon her, and now so were the eyes of Marcus, and whoever else he might involve. The night advanced, and Dr. Richard and Sarah continued talking on the porch, the moon illuminating their faces. He listened attentively, his apprehension mixing with deep empathy. He knew trusting her was a risk, but something in her story, in her genuine pain, and in the way she had transformed Michael's life, prevented him from pushing her away. "I know this is a lot to take in," Sarah said, her voice tired. "I don't expect you to understand completely, or to blindly trust me, but I needed you to know at least part of the truth." "I appreciate your honesty, Sarah," Dr. Richard replied, holding her hand more firmly. "And I believe you, or at least, I want to believe." He paused. But what do we do now? If these people are still out there and if they know you're alive, and that you might have kept something from the research." Sarah looked at him, concern stamped on her face. "It's a risk I've been taking since I decided not just to survive, but to live again. But now it's not just me. There's you and Michael." The danger, which before seemed confined to Sarah's past, began to infiltrate the present, threatening the fragile peace they had built. The revelation of the fire and hidden interests opened a new front of mystery and potential conflict. And, somewhere in the city, Marcus was about to make a decision that could trigger a series of unpredictable events, all because of a worn notebook and the secrets it held. The game was just beginning, and the pieces were moving in ways that none of them could fully predict. The link between Sarah's traumatic past and the present of that house was becoming dangerously clear, and what would come next would depend on who would reach the secrets of Project Phoenix first. Marcus spent the night immersed in Sarah's notes. The coffee grew cold, the sun rose and set again, but he barely noticed the passage of time. The notebook was a treasure trove of information, but also a labyrinth. The complex diagrams, equations, and cryptic references required considerable mental effort. However, the more he deciphered, the more fascinated he became. It wasn't just scientific research. There were also philosophical annotations, reflections on the ethics of knowledge, and the potential impact of the discoveries on society. Sarah wasn't just a scientist, she was a visionary, and Project Phoenix seemed to be the culmination of all this. He managed to decipher more coordinates and references to locations that weren't public. It seemed that Sarah's team had secret work and storage locations, perhaps to protect the research from prying eyes even before the incident. One of the notes, written in a more complex code, appeared to be a list of names accompanied by symbols. Marcus suspected they were the names of team members, and perhaps the symbols indicated their status, if they survived, if they were missing, or something worse. The most significant decipherment came from a section of the notebook that seemed to be a summary of the results of Project Phoenix. It was about a new way to generate and store energy, incredibly efficient and clean, based on principles that defied conventional physics. If that was real, it could revolutionize the energy sector, making traditional sources and the companies that controlled them obsolete. The financial potential and power associated with this discovery were incalculable, and the danger Sarah had mentioned became frighteningly clear. This was worth a fortune, worth lives. Marcus closed the notebook, feeling the weight of responsibility and opportunity in his hands. He had in his possession the key to a secret worth billions. He could sell this information to the affected industries, which would certainly like to permanently suppress the discovery. Or he could sell it to competitors, or even to governments interested in gaining a strategic advantage. The possibilities were vast and dangerous. He thought of Mrs. Patterson and her petty dispute for Dr. Richard's attention. She had no idea of the magnitude of what she had found. Using this to get rid of Sarah in the house was like using an atomic bomb to kill a fly. Marcus decided that Mrs. Patterson was a disposable pawn in this game. He wouldn't share the entirety of what he discovered with her. He would give just enough to keep her interested and perhaps use her as a distraction while he planned his next move. Meanwhile, at the grand house, Mrs. Patterson was boiling with impatience. Marcus had promised to contact her, but the days dragged on without news. She observed Sarah, who seemed calmer on the outside, but Mrs. Patterson could feel the tension beneath the surface. Dr. Richard was clearly more protective of Sarah now, which deeply irritated Mrs. Patterson. He spent more time with her and Michael, and the atmosphere in the house, previously rigid and formal, was becoming lighter, full of Michael's laughter and quiet conversations between him and Sarah. Mrs. Patterson decided she couldn't wait any longer. She called Marcus, her voice tense. "So? Did you discover anything in that notebook? I have to know what that woman is hiding," Marcus answered, his voice calm and controlled. "I discovered some things, Mrs. Patterson. As I suspected, it's not a diary. They're work notes. And yes, there are codes and references to a past she clearly wants to hide." He hesitated, deciding what to reveal. "It seems to be linked to a research institution, and to something that went very wrong there." something that made her change her identity. Something that went wrong? Mrs. Patterson pressed. What? The anonymous report said her identity was false, that she lied. She lied about who she is now, yes, Marcus confirmed, manipulating the truth. But it seems it was to escape something that happened in the past, something serious. The notebook contains references to a project, something that involved important discoveries, and that seems to have attracted the attention of dangerous people. Mrs. Patterson felt a shiver. Dangerous people. This was more than she expected. What kind of people? She asked, curiosity mixing with fear. I'm still deciphering the details, Marcus lied smoothly, but it seems that what they were researching was worth a lot, and that there was a conflict, an incident, and that she was in the middle of it. He decided to drop a lure. There are names in the notebook, Mrs. Patterson, names of people involved. Perhaps some of these names could tell you more about what happened. Mrs. Patterson tensed. Names. If she could find out who these people were, perhaps she could find someone who would confirm how dangerous Sarah was, someone who would help her remove her from the house. Can you give me these names? She asked, her voice anxious. Marcus smiled to himself. Mrs. Patterson was exactly where he wanted her. I can, but not over the phone. It's sensitive information. We need to meet again, and the price for this information is higher than before. Mrs. Patterson hesitated, but the prospect of finally having something concrete against Sarah was too tempting. She agreed to a new meeting and a new payment. Marcus hung up, satisfied. He would give Mrs. Patterson some irrelevant or hard-to-trace names just to keep her busy. Meanwhile, he would use the real information for his own purposes. At the house, Dr. Richard tried to deal with the new layer of complexity in Sarah's life. The idea that she was a survivor of a dangerous incident linked to valuable research and unscrupulous people kept him constantly alert. He discreetly reinforced the property's security, installing cameras and hiring more personnel without revealing the complete reason to anyone, not even Sarah. He didn't want to scare her, but he needed to be prepared. Sarah noticed the change in atmosphere, the attentive looks of the new security guards, the way Dr. Richard seemed more tense. She knew he was worried, and guilt gnawed at her. Her attempt to find peace had inadvertently brought potential danger into their lives. One afternoon, while helping Michael with a school project about different cultures, Sarah felt a pang of nostalgia. The project involved researching inventions and discoveries from various civilizations. They were reading about ancient Greece and its advances in philosophy and science. That's how I felt in my old job, Sarah commented to Michael, a melancholic smile on her lips. As if I were connected to a long history of people who wanted to understand the world, who wanted to make it better. Michael looked at her, his large, curious eyes. Why did you stop, Sarah? He asked with the direct simplicity of children. Sarah hesitated, searching for the right words. Sometimes, Michael, things don't happen as we plan. Sometimes people with different ideas, or with fear of new ideas, can try to impede progress. They were afraid of what you discovered, Michael asked. Sarah nodded slowly. Yes, dear, they were afraid, because what we discovered could change many things, and not everyone likes changes, especially when they affect the power they have. She didn't go into details, but the conversation with Michael made her reflect on the original purpose of Project Phoenix. It wasn't about money or power. It was about creating a better future. And perhaps, just maybe, there was still a way to honor that purpose. Meanwhile, Dr. Richard received an unexpected call. It was from an old colleague who worked in an area tangential to scientific research. He had been contacted by Marcus, who was investigating a delicate matter and needed information about a specific institution and a research project that had supposedly been destroyed in a fire years ago. The colleague, knowing of Dr. Richard's recent interest in Sarah and her mysterious past, thought he should know. Dr. Richard felt a chill down his spine. Marcus. The name wasn't strange to him. He was known in information and investigation circles, not always for the best reasons. He knew Marcus worked for whoever paid the most, and had no scruples in using information for his own benefit. And now Marcus was investigating Sarah's past, using information that probably came from Mrs. Patterson. The web was tightening. Mrs. Patterson, Marcus, the notebook, Project Phoenix, the dangerous people from Sarah's past. Everything was interconnected. Dr. Richard realized he could no longer just react. He needed to act. He needed to find out what Marcus knew and why he was interested, and he needed to protect Sarah and Michael at all costs. He called Marcus, requesting an urgent meeting. Marcus, surprised by the direct contact from Dr. Richard, but seeing a new opportunity for profit, agreed. They arranged to meet at a neutral location the following morning. Dr. Richard didn't tell Sarah about the call. He wanted more information before worrying her further, but anxiety consumed him. He looked at Michael, who now laughed loudly as Sarah helped him draw a complex diagram. His son's happiness was the most important thing to him, and he would do anything to protect it. That night, heavy rain fell over the city. Thunder echoed and lightning illuminated the sky. Sarah was in her room, unable to sleep. The storm seemed to reflect the turbulence inside her. She felt that the past was approaching, that the peace she had found was fragile. She thought about the notebook. Where would Mrs. Patterson have found it, and what would she do with it? The notebook contained not just research, but also personal information, codes, references to safe locations and trustworthy people, or those who used to be trustworthy. If it fell into the wrong hands, a lightning flash illuminated the room, and for an instant Sarah had the sensation of seeing a shadow outside the window. She quickly got up, her heart racing, and looked outside. There was nothing, just the rain falling and the wind shaking the trees. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, the paranoia returning, but the feeling of being watched persisted. Meanwhile, in his office, Marcus reviewed his notes on Project Phoenix. He had deciphered enough to know that it was real, and that there were people out there who were still looking for this research. People who would stop at nothing to obtain it or destroy it. He had the notebook, he had the key, and now Dr. Richard was entering the game. Things were getting interesting and dangerous. The meeting between Dr. Richard and Marcus the next morning promised to be a turning point. What would Marcus reveal? What would Dr. Richard do with this information? And how would this affect Sarah and Michael? The storm outside seemed a harbinger of the events that were about to unfold, bringing to light buried secrets and confronting everyone with the consequences of a past that refused to stay in the past. The fragile truce was at an end, and confrontation was inevitable. The cafe where Dr. Richard and Marcus had arranged to meet was modern and busy, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere that hung over them. Dr. Richard arrived promptly, his expression serious but controlled. Marcus was already there, seated at a discreet table in the back, observing the entrance with his keen eyes. He nodded slightly, a silent invitation for Dr. Richard to approach. Dr. Richard sat across from him without beating around the bush. "You contacted a colleague of mine, Marcus, asking about an institution and a project that were destroyed. Is this about Sarah?" Marcus smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Straight to the point, Dr. Richard. I like that. Yes, it's about your employee, or whatever her role is in your life now." The insinuation irritated Dr. Richard, but he didn't show it. "She is my son's caretaker, and a person for whom I have great respect. What do you know about her past, and what makes her so interesting to you?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "The notebook that was brought to me by Mrs. Patterson, a woman very interested in everything that happens in your house, by the way, contains research notes. Not just any research, something of the highest level, something that, if real, is worth a fortune." He paused for effect. "And is also worth a lot of danger." "Danger?" Dr. Richard repeated, though he already expected this. "The notes refer to a project, Project Phoenix. It seems it was research about energy, something revolutionary, and that the people behind this project didn't want it to be disclosed. Hence the fire, to destroy the research and silence the researchers." Marcus observed Dr. Richard's reaction, satisfied to see the concern on his face. "Your Sarah, it seems, was part of this team and survived. And most importantly, she seems to have kept part of the material. The notebook is proof. Dr. Richard felt the weight of Marcus's words. Sarah's story was real, and the implications were enormous. Who are these people? The ones who wanted to silence her? He asked. I'm still investigating, Marcus lied again, maintaining control of the information. But from what I understand, they are powerful interests. Industry giants that would be harmed by the new technology. People who didn't hesitate to use extreme methods to protect their businesses. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. And if they know she's alive and that the notebook exists, they'll come after her, and after whoever is protecting her. Dr. Richard understood the implicit threat. Marcus wasn't just selling information, he was positioning himself as an intermediary, someone who could both help and harm. What do you want, Marcus? Dr. Richard asked directly. Marcus smiled again. Information has a price, Dr. Richard. And valuable information has a high price. I have in my hands the key to Sarah's past. I can use this to expose her, to deliver her to those who are looking for her. Or I can help you protect her. It depends on how much you're willing to pay. Dr. Richard felt disgusted by Marcus's coldness, but he knew he needed to play his game. How much? It's not just money, Marcus replied. It's also about access, contacts, favors. I can give you the names, the details, maybe even help create a security plan. But you'll have to trust me and reward me adequately. The idea of trusting Marcus was repugnant, but Dr. Richard saw few immediate alternatives. He needed to buy time, understand the real extent of the danger, and find out who these hidden enemies were. I need proof, Marcus, Dr. Richard said, keeping calm. I say the notebook contains valuable information. Show me something that proves this, something that convinces me the danger is real and that you can really help me. Marcus thought for a moment. He didn't want to reveal too much, but he needed to give Dr. Richard a glimpse of what was at stake. He took a small piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. This is one of the coordinates I found in the notebook. It seems to be a storage location. Maybe there's more material from Project Phoenix there, or maybe it's a trap. You decide if it's worth investigating. Dr. Richard took the paper, looking at the sequence of numbers and letters. It was a real coordinate, but of a location he didn't recognize. Marcus's offer was tempting and dangerous at the same time. And Mrs. Patterson? Dr. Richard asked, changing the subject. Does she know the dimension of this? Marcus chuckled softly. Mrs. Patterson? She just wants to get rid of Sarah to go back to being the queen of the house. She thinks the notebook is just proof that Sarah is an imposter. She has no idea she's dealing with something much bigger. Use her as you wish, Dr. Richard. She's easily manipulated. The confirmation of Mrs. Patterson's involvement, though expected, was a blow. Dr. Richard felt a mixture of anger and disappointment. Mrs. Patterson, who had worked for his family for years, was putting everyone at risk due to petty jealousy. The meeting ended with a tacit agreement. Dr. Richard would pay Marcus an initial sum for his consultations and would consider his future proposals. Marcus would keep the notebook and continue his investigation, promising to share relevant information at his discretion. Both knew it was a dangerous game, where trust was non-existent and interests overlapped. Back at the house, Dr. Richard found Sarah and Michael in the garden planting flowers. The scene was one of idyllic tranquility that contrasted violently with the conversation he had just had. He observed Sarah, her calm posture, her genuine smile, while Michael enthusiastically buried a seed. How could that woman, who seemed so serene, have survived such a dark and dangerous world? He approached them, forcing a smile. Looks like you're having fun. We are, Michael exclaimed, showing his hands dirty with soil. Sarah said flowers are like ideas, they need care to grow and blossom. Dr. Richard looked at Sarah, his eyes conveying a mixture of concern and admiration. She understood that the meeting with Marcus hadn't been easy. Later, when Michael was busy with his toys, Dr. Richard called Sarah for a talk. He decided to be honest, at least in part. I met with Marcus, he said, his voice low. He has the notebook, and he knows about Project Phoenix, And about the fire. Sarah paled. How? How did he get the notebook? Dr. Richard hesitated for a moment, reluctant to reveal Mrs. Patterson's betrayal, but the truth was necessary. Mrs. Patterson found it and took it to Marcus. She was suspicious of you, wanted to discover your secret. Sarah closed her eyes, an expression of pain on her face. Being betrayed by someone inside the house itself, by someone she saw every day, was a cruel blow. Mrs. Patterson, she whispered. I knew she didn't like me, but to hand over my things, to involve someone like Marcus? She didn't know the dimension of what she was doing, Dr. Richard explained. Marcus manipulated her. He realized the notebook contained something much bigger than a simple story of a false identity. And what is he going to do? Sarah asked, her voice tense. He wants to negotiate, Dr. Richard replied. He knows the research is valuable, and that there are people who might still be interested in it, or in silencing you for good. He took her hand. Sarah, the danger is real, and it's closer than we thought. Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on his. I know, I felt it. The feeling of being watched. I thought it was my paranoia, but it's not paranoia, Dr. Richard confirmed. Marcus has the notebook and he's investigating, and if he finds the right people, or if they find him first. They were silent for a moment, the gravity of the situation hanging in the air. The house, which before seemed a safe refuge, now seemed vulnerable. We need the notebook back, Sarah said finally, her voice firm. It contains crucial information, not just about the research, but about storage locations, about the people who were involved, and perhaps about who was behind the fire. Marcus won't give it up easily, Dr. Richard replied. He sees this as his bargaining chip. Then we need to find another way, Sarah insisted. Maybe I can decipher more things without the notebook. I remember a lot. And there are other copies, or at least parts of them, in safe locations that my colleagues and I established. Safe locations? Dr. Richard asked, hopeful. Yes, Sarah confirmed. We had a contingency plan, in case something happened. Small. Hideouts with parts of the research or keys for access to encrypted data. But they're scattered, and some may have been compromised. Sarah's revelation opened a new possibility, but also introduced more uncertainties. Dr. Richard realized that the fight wouldn't just be to protect Sarah, but perhaps to recover or protect the knowledge that she and her team had discovered. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patterson, frustrated with the lack of concrete information from Marcus, decided to act on her own. She began rummaging through Sarah's room again, looking for anything Marcus might have missed, or for something that confirmed what he had said about the danger. She found a box hidden at the bottom of the wardrobe. Inside, there were some old photos, documents with different names, and a small metal key with a strange symbol. Mrs. Patterson didn't recognize the symbol, but the photos and documents were revealing. There were photos of Sarah with a different name, with other people, in an environment that seemed to be the research institution. There were certificates and awards with her old name and the name of Project Phoenix. And there were letters, some of them mentioning concerns about security and pressure to stop the research. Mrs. Patterson felt a shiver. Marcus was right. Sarah wasn't just an imposter. She was running from something serious. And the key? What was that? Key for? She kept the photos, documents, and the key, determined to use them to prove to Dr. Richard that Sarah was a threat. She didn't realize that by doing this, she was dangerously deepening in the same game Marcus was playing, without having the slightest idea of the rules or the stakes. That night, Dr. Richard and Sarah discussed the options. Recovering the notebook from Marcus seemed the priority, but it was risky. Trying to access Sarah's safe locations was also risky, as they might be monitored by enemies from the past. We need help, Dr. Richard concluded. Someone who can help us navigate this world of secrets and dangers. Someone who isn't Marcus. Sarah thought for a moment. There was a person, someone she trusted implicitly, someone who also survived the fire, but she didn't know where this person was, or if they were still alive. There was a colleague, Sarah said, her voice hesitant. He was brilliant, and loyal. We had a pact. If something happened, we would try to meet in a place that only we knew. Where is this place? Dr. Richard asked, hopeful. Sarah described an isolated location, a meeting point they had chosen years ago. It was a gamble, but it was the only chance they had of finding a trustworthy ally. Dr. Richard decided they would go together. He wouldn't let Sarah face this alone, and he needed to make sure the danger wouldn't get close to Michael. While they made plans, unaware that Mrs. Patterson had found more evidence and that Marcus was preparing to make his next move, the web of secrets and dangers tightened around the house. The search for lost knowledge and the fight for survival were about to collide, and everyone's fate was at stake. The journey to the meeting place of Sarah and her colleague promised to be full of uncertainties and potential confrontations, leading the narrative to its imminent climax. The journey to Sarah's colleague's meeting place was tense. Dr. Richard drove, his eyes fixed on the road, while Sarah looked out the window, a mixture of hope and apprehension on her face. The location was an abandoned old observatory in the hills, far from the city, a place they had chosen years ago for its isolation and symbolism, a place to observe the universe, to seek knowledge. It was a high-stakes gamble. They didn't know if Ethan would be there or even if he was still alive. They reached the observatory at nightfall. The stone structure looked like a ghost under the faint moonlight. They entered cautiously, Dr. Richard's flashlight cutting through the dusty darkness. The interior was cold and silent, the large telescope covered by a dusty cloth in the center. Door of the main room. "Ethan," Sarah called, her voice echoing. "Ethan, it's Sarah." A sound came from a dark corner. A tall, thin man emerged from the shadows, his eyes wide with surprise and relief. It was Ethan. He looked tired in simple clothes, but his eyes still shone with the intelligence Sarah remembered. "Sarah, it really is you," he exclaimed, running to embrace her. The embrace was long and emotional, a reunion of survivors from a shared nightmare. They pulled apart, Ethan looking at Dr. Richard with curiosity. "This is Dr. Richard," Sarah introduced. "He has been helping me and Michael." Ethan nodded, shaking Dr. Richard's hand. "Thank you for taking care of her. I thought, after the fire, that I was the only one." They sat on dusty crates and Ethan began to tell his story. He too had barely survived, severely injured. He spent years recovering and hiding, changing cities, names, living in hiding. He had tried to find other survivors, but without success. "I knew it wasn't an accident, Sarah," Ethan said, his voice serious. "I saw things in the days leading up to it. Strange people lurking around the campus, and I found this." From a worn backpack, he took out a small metallic device, complex and strange, with lights and buttons, that Sarah immediately recognized. It was a prototype of one of the central components of Project Phoenix, something they thought had been destroyed in the fire. "Is that the phase modulator?" Sarah asked, shocked. "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "I took it on the night of the fire. I thought if the research was destroyed, at least we would have proof that it existed, and maybe one day we could rebuild it." He explained that the phase modulator was the key to activating the clean energy technology they had discovered. Without it, the research was just theory. With it, it could become reality. "But that's dangerous, Ethan," Sarah said, worried. "If the people who caused the fire know this exists—" "I know," he replied. "That's why I hid. But I also continued investigating, tried to find out who was behind it all. And I discovered some names of companies, of consortiums, and of people in positions of power in these companies." Ethan revealed names of major energy and technology corporations whose business models would be directly threatened by Project Phoenix. He had documents, encrypted emails he had managed to intercept, showing that these companies were aware of the research and saw it as an existential threat. They didn't just want to suppress the technology, they wanted to control it, or destroy it to protect their financial empires. While they talked far away, Marcus was in his office negotiating. He had contacted representatives of the corporations that Ethan identified. He had Sarah's notebook, proof of the existence of Project Phoenix, and more importantly, the notes that could lead to the reconstruction of the research. He was auctioning the information to the highest bidder, playing one side against the other. One of the representatives, a man named Mr. Thorne, was particularly aggressive. He represented a conglomerate that had invested billions in fossil fuel technologies. For him, Project Phoenix was a nightmare. He wanted the notebook, wanted all the data, and wanted to ensure that this technology never saw the light of day. "We have the money, Marcus," Thorne said on the phone, his voice cold. "Name your price, and ensure that this information is destroyed, and that whoever possessed it is no longer a problem." Marcus smiled. He had no intention of causing physical harm to Sarah or Ethan. That was risky and unnecessary. His goal was money. He planned to sell the notebook, take his payment, and disappear. He didn't know that Mrs. Patterson, in her own search for evidence, was about to complicate things. Back at the house, Mrs. Patterson, with the photos, documents, and key in hand, decided to confront Dr. Richard. She waited for him to return, anger and jealousy consuming her. When he entered, she approached him, her voice trembling with indignation. "Dr. Richard, you need to see this. I knew that woman wasn't who she claimed to be. Look." She threw the photos and documents on the table. Dr. Richard, exhausted from the trip and the conversation with Ethan, looked at the material. He saw the photos of Sarah with another name, the certificates, the letters. Everything confirmed what Sarah had told him. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I know about Sarah's past. She told me." Mrs. Patterson was shocked. "What, she told you, and you still keep her here after all this? She's dangerous. She's running from dangerous people." "She's not dangerous," Dr. Richard retorted, his patience wearing thin. "She's a survivor, and the dangerous people are the ones who caused the fire and tried to kill her. And now, because of you, for having given her notebook to Marcus, you've put us all at risk." Mrs. Patterson stepped back, stunned. I didn't know. I just wanted—" "How you wanted to harm Sarah," Dr. Richard completed, the disappointment clear on his face. "Out of jealousy. You had no idea of the magnitude of what you were doing." He picked up the key Mrs. Patterson had found. "Where did you find this?" "In her box," Mrs. Patterson replied, still in shock, "along with the rest." Dr. Richard examined the key. The symbol on it was the same that Ethan had described as being the mark of one of the secure storage locations. This key could open one of those hideouts. At that exact moment, Dr. Richard's phone rang. It was Marcus. "Dr. Richard," Marcus's voice was tense. "Things have gotten complicated. The buyers are impatient. They know the notebook exists, and they know Sarah is alive. They're coming after her. And I can no longer guarantee the safety of the information or of your house." Marcus, feeling the pressure and danger of dealing with such powerful people, was trying to rid himself of the problem, perhaps even creating a distraction for himself. He gave Dr. Richard a veiled warning. The representatives of the corporations were on the move. Dr. Richard hung up, feeling panic rise. They were coming. The people who caused the fire, the enemies from Sarah's past, were coming to his house. And Michael was there. He looked at Mrs. Patterson, who still seemed stunned. "You need to leave here, Mrs. Patterson. Now. You've put everyone in danger." Mrs. Patterson, finally understanding the seriousness of the situation, nodded, her face pale. She wasn't evil, she was just petty and resentful. Fear overcame jealousy. Dr. Richard called Sarah, his voice urgent. "Sarah, they're coming. Marcus warned me. The people from the past, they know where I am. You need to leave the observatory now and take Ethan and what he found." Sarah listened, her heart racing. The danger had arrived. "Where do we go?" she asked. Dr. Richard thought quickly. The house wasn't safe, the observatory wasn't either. Where could they be safe? And the key? "Mrs. Patterson found the key," he exclaimed. "Mrs. Patterson found a key with a symbol. It's from one of the safe locations, isn't it?" "Yes," Sarah replied. "It's the key to the main hideout. It contains complete copies of the research and backup data. It's our final contingency plan." "Where is it?" Dr. Richard asked. Sarah gave the coordinates. It was an underground location, hidden beneath an old property that belonged to the research institution, but which had been considered abandoned after the fire. It was the safest place they had. "I'll go there with Ethan," Sarah said. "Take Michael to a safe place, anywhere away from here, and meet us there when you can." "No," Dr. Richard said, determined. "I won't separate Michael from you. You are his light. We'll all go there. It's the safest place, and maybe, with what you and Ethan have, we can finally end this." They arranged to meet at the hideout. Dr. Richard ran to Michael's room, gently waking him. "Michael, dear, we're going on a little trip, an adventure." Michael, sleepy but trusting in his father, nodded. Dr. Richard quickly dressed him, gathered some supplies, and left the house, leaving Mrs. Patterson behind, still processing the events. Meanwhile, at the observatory, Sarah and Ethan took the phase modulator and Ethan's documents. They knew time was limited. The journey to the hideout would be long and dangerous. The following hours were a race against time. Dr. Richard drove through the night, Michael asleep in the back seat. Sarah and Ethan traveled in another car, maintaining contact by phone. The feeling of being hunted was constant. They arrived at the hideout location at dawn. It was a discreet entrance in the ground, hidden under low vegetation. Sarah used the key and opened the metal hatch. They descended a narrow staircase to an underground bunker, surprisingly well preserved. There was old computer equipment, shelves, full of documents, and an emergency power generator. Sarah and Ethan quickly began activating the systems. They connected the phase modulator to a console. Ethan inserted the data he had collected. Sarah began accessing the encrypted files. Dr. Richard and Michael arrived shortly after. The reunion, though tense, brought momentary relief. They were together in a safe place, with the final pieces of the puzzle. While Sarah and Ethan worked, Dr. Richard explained to Michael in simple terms that they were helping Sarah protect something very important, something that could help many people. Michael, though confused, felt the seriousness of the situation and remained quiet, watching Sarah and Ethan with admiration. Suddenly, alarms sounded in the bunker. "They've found us!" Ethan exclaimed. Dr. Richard ran to a monitor showing images from external security cameras. Several black cars stopped at the entrance. Men in suits got out with determined expressions. They were the representatives of the corporations, led by Mr. Thorne. They didn't look like assassins, but their presence commanded respect and fear. Thorne and his men found the entrance to the bunker and began trying to open it. The hatch was strong, but not indestructible. They had little time. "What do we do?" Dr. Richard asked, ready to protect his family and friends. Sarah and Ethan looked at each other. The research was almost fully accessible. They had a choice: try to flee, risking being caught, or use what they had to confront the situation head-on. "We can't run forever," Sarah said, her voice firm. "They would always find us, and the research would be lost." Ethan nodded. "We need to use what we have. The truth." Sarah accessed the bunker's communication system, which could transmit to external networks. She began compiling the research, data, Ethan's documents, and a manifesto that she and her team had written about the purpose of Project Phoenix. While Thorne and his men tried to break open the hatch, Sarah initiated the transmission. She sent the data to a network of trusted contacts: investigative journalists, independent scientists, non-governmental organizations. She was releasing Project Phoenix to the world. The banging on the hatch grew stronger. Thorne shouted orders from outside. Time was running out. Sarah finished the transmission, her fingers trembling on the keyboard. "It's done," she whispered. "The research is out there. It can no longer be suppressed." The moment the first news about the transmission began to circulate, reaching even the phones of Thorne's men, the attitude outside changed. The banging decreased. The voices became confused. Mr. Thorne, receiving an urgent call from his superiors, realized with horror what had happened. The information he was desperately trying to control or destroy had been released to the world. His mission had failed spectacularly, and trying to silence Sarah now would be useless and would attract unwanted mass attention. The hatch stopped being forced. A tense silence fell over the bunker. After a few minutes, Thorne spoke, his voice muffled but audible. "Miss Sarah," he shouted, "you've won for now, but this isn't over." He and his men retreated. The immediate threat had been neutralized, not by force, but by revelation. Project Phoenix had been reborn from the ashes, not as a secret to be controlled, but as knowledge to be shared. Inside the bunker, Sarah, Ethan, Dr. Richard, and Michael breathed in relief. They were safe, and the world was about to change. In C. The days that followed, the news of Project Phoenix exploded in global media. The clean energy research, the implications for the future, the story of the fire and the attempt at suppression, everything came to light. The corporations involved faced public scrutiny and investigations. Marcus, realizing that the notebook was now useless as a bargaining chip for suppression, but still valuable as evidence, decided to hand it over to the authorities, ensuring his own safety and perhaps even profiting in another way. Mrs. Patterson, humiliated and scared, resigned and discreetly disappeared. Sarah, Ethan, and Dr. Richard, along with Michael, emerged from the hideout no longer as fugitives, but as the guardians of a new era. Sarah, with her true identity revealed, became a public figure, advocating for the ethical and global use of the technology. Ethan joined her, working to ensure that Project Phoenix would benefit everyone. Dr. Richard remained by Sarah's side, offering his support and protection. Their relationship, forged in adversity and mutual trust, flourished. Michael, now more communicative than ever, had in Sarah not just a caretaker, but a heroine, someone who had fought for a better future. The grand house, previously the stage of secrets and tensions, became a home of hope and purpose. The danger had passed, but the lessons remained. The final revelation was not just about technology, but about the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of truth, and the power of connection. Project Phoenix wasn't just about energy. It was about lighting a light in the darkness, about being reborn stronger from the ashes, and about finding a home, not just in a place, but in the people we love. And so, the lives of